Hey, Net Builders, thanks for joining us for another great and informative episode where you're bound to get a bunch of value. And today we have Dr. Kevin Payne. And he told me that I don't have to call him doctor anymore after this. So I see that as a great privilege. So I'll leave the floor to you, Kevin, and please introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate that, RJ. So three things that are probably relevant about me to frame a conversation. One, I'm stupidly overeducated. So yeah, I've got doctor in front of my name. My doctorate's in sociology and psychology. I've spent 30 years studying people, and I spent 15 years as a professor. The last decade or so, I've been a startup tech entrepreneur, and I've been involved in teams and consulting for other companies, primarily around research methods and data science. So how tech companies use an understanding of people or an understanding of data to help further their missions. So that's what I do. And then of course my most recent startup, and I hope my last, is because this one's a labor of love, is Your Life Lived Well. And there we use social behavioral biomedical science and technology to help improve the lives of people who are living with chronic illness, for those who are loved ones and caregivers, and to help medical and therapeutic professionals do a better job supporting us. And that sort of leads me into point number two, and that is I live with multiple sclerosis. I've had MS. I've been symptomatic since 1989 when I was in college. I didn't get correctly diagnosed until 2006, which is not that unusual with MS. It's kind of a squirrely condition. And for people who don't know, they may have heard of the term multiple sclerosis, but they're not quite sure what it is. MS is a neurodegenerative autoimmune condition. So in other words, my immune system is attacking my brain and my spinal cord.
Wow.
And in MS, the multiple sclerosis literally means many scars. And the scars are what you see on an MRI that are the result of my immune system attacking the myelin, which is a fatty substance that surrounds the neurons in our brain and spinal cord. So the symptoms can be all over the place. They can be everything. Mine range from numbness and issues with my legs and chronic pain and chronic fatigue and fogginess in how I think sometimes, and another 30 symptoms that come and go. And I also spent a decade as a caregiver for a wife with an advanced cancer.
Wow.
So I've lived, the difficulties of chronic illness from both sides of it. And that really motivated me to turn those awful experiences through my science into an enterprise that can help other people not have maybe quite so difficult a path as I've had. And then my third thing that may be interesting for your audience is I am an enthusiastic skydiver. I
love it.
I fling my body from planes at every opportunity. I went back to skydiving in 2019, not only as a way to reclaim a childhood dream that I thought I'd lost due to my multiple sclerosis, but also as a way to confront my biggest fear. And it's not fear of heights. My biggest fear is my own body, because it has betrayed me in so many ways over the last few years. So I figured if I'm falling on the ground anyway, I'm going to go up 3 miles and fall with style and figure out a way to make my wonky body save myself every time. So that's me in a nutshell. And as you see behind me, that's my Akita Sanmo, and my little black rescue kitty, Moshi, is wandering around here as well. So they may visit us.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing
Sure.
that so much. And and I love the fact that you do it all with a smile. You know what I mean? A lot of people that went through situations that you went through and experienced, it really found it hard to force a smile on their face. So I think that,
Man, life is a comedy or a tragedy. And really they're split by a hair's breadth. So yeah, I've been through some really awful places in my life, but goodness, I'm still around and I'm still trying, and there is still so much good to be found in life.
yeah.
And so I'm not going to sit around making myself miserable.
Mm. Which most people would do. And you mentioned something before. You said that your body failed you, but you never let your mind do so.
Well, it was touch and go there for a while.
Oh
I
yeah.
hit some really awful places. I had the worst exacerbation. So multiple sclerosis, most of us have the relapsing remitting form. So that means the symptoms come and go.
Oh,
And after a while, you'll be like me, where there'll be some symptoms that are always there, but then they get worse or better. And then there'll be other symptoms that kind of come and go at different times. And an exacerbation is when the condition flares up and you either get new symptoms or existing symptoms get a lot worse.
oh wow.
And so I had an exacerbation a few years back that was different from any that I'd had before. It was primarily cognitive. And under an MRI, we discovered that it was a massive right frontal temporal exacerbation. So what that means is this is the part of our brain that is doing a lot of our higher cognitive functioning, abstract thinking, it's processing social signals, it's logical thinking, it's emotional regulation. In fact, when you get damage to that area of your brain, the laundry list looks a lot like the symptoms of dementia.
Gotcha.
And so that was the worst exacerbation I ever had. And it really did blow up my life. It blew up one of my companies, it blew up my family. And I really did get to the point where I thought I no longer see a path from the life that is in front of me to a version of life that I'm interested in pursuing.
Yeah.
And so going back to skydiving was literally my last chance that I was giving myself to reclaim something that I thought that I'd lost and develop the confidence to save myself.
I'll ask you one more question on the topic, because this
Sure.
is, I really appreciate you sharing this. I really, really do. Do you believe that that your knowledge in your field of study, do you believe the knowledge that you gained from that was instrumental in helping you be able to deal with the mental part of this whole thing? I might be
Yeah.
wording it wrong, but
No. I understand exactly what you're saying. And
gotcha,
it
gotcha.
was a double-edged sword, truthfully, because ultimately, yes, it doubtlessly was core in saving me. And that's one of the reasons why I do what I do now, because we think that living with a health condition that's not going to go away is just a little list of medical signs and symptoms that go with your diagnosis, but it's not, because living with a condition that's never going to get better spills out into all of your life. It changes the way you think about yourself, the way other people think about you, the way you function in the world. It changes the opportunities that the world puts in front of you. And everything you think, feel, do, say, relate, and how you operate in the world is affected. And you're not trained for that. And I'm not either. And nobody warns us that that's what's going to happen. And nobody warns us that that's what's going to happen when a loved one gets diagnosed. Because we have to realize that right now in the United States, over half of all Americans have at least one chronic health diagnosis. 18% of us have 5 or more chronic health diagnoses.
Wow.
1 in 5 of us lives with chronic pain that constricts our life opportunities. 75% of us live with distress that causes depression and dysthymia and anxiety and other things like that. So we have created a world that humans are not really well adapted to. And our system, our medical health and wellness system, is fundamentally a sick care system based on an acute care model. So the idea is you identify a medical problem, apply a medical solution, pat you on the head, and send you back to your life that you had before. Well, that doesn't work for a chronic condition. Everything's going to change. And so the important thing is to understand that 2/3 of health outcomes are due to cognitive and behavioral and social factors and a little bit of environment. And what does that mean? That means that even if you have something like I do that's not going to get better, more of your quality of health overall and a lot more of your quality of life is going to depend on these other things that we can do something about. We can change our mindset. We can change our behaviors. We can renegotiate our relationships so that they're better fit to this new reality. We can adapt our environments so that we don't constantly have to face additional challenges. And that's what Your Life Lived Well is about.
Outstanding. I love that. I really love that. So Life Lived Well. Now, how is this platform structured? Is it in the form of an app? Is it a program that you go through, a step-by-step program, a book?
Yeah, so right now, of course, it's the book, and there's that fabulous photo that
bring it a little close to the camera for us
that we can talk about if we'd like, and that actually tells the entire story of the book and of the enterprise. So it's seminars, webinars. We serve 3 different populations. So people living with chronic illness, loved ones and caregivers. And then I do a lot with medical health, wellness, therapeutic, fitness, caregiving professionals, because they're trained according to that acute care model.
Yeah.
And so part of what I do are seminars and webinars for those people. And then I also do organizational consulting with those kinds of enterprise to help them improve their support of people with chronic illness and to reduce burnout and frustration and that sort of thing in the process.
Yeah.
And then the app will be out in about a year.
Outstanding. And you know, like, so I just did a podcast a minute ago and we talked about individuals with disabilities or whatever. And I, for the first time ever on Net Builders, brought up my son's situation, you know, so I really appreciate having this conversation, you know, and I definitely want to, I have to get that book because me and my wife, we fall in the category of realm as caregiver to our son who was born with hydrocephalus. And so you're already, I'm pretty sure you're aware of the ventricles, water on the brain, you know, so it caused that laundry list that you mentioned,
Hmm.
scoliosis, vision gone,
Hmm.
bedridden, so, programs like this and bring a lot of value to people like me and my wife who, we're constantly that burnout. Burnout, I don't know how many times we've experienced burnout just from his appointments alone.
Sure. And then, of course, you can get to feel guilty because you feel burnout.
Yes.
And and you can sit there feeling like, oh, I'm an awful human for getting really tired and frustrated with supporting this other little human that I love.
Yeah.
And and no, that doesn't mean anything about how much you love and care for that other person. It just means that you've had life force you out onto the edge for a long time without any rest. And humans are not adapted to live out there on the edge all the time. We need to get out there sometimes because that's where we grow and learn, and some of our really great experiences happen. But it's also where some of our most awful experiences happen too. And in between, then we've got to take ourselves back to our home where we can feel secure and rest and relax and recover and recuperate and rebuild and grow and consolidate and all those things,
Mm.
so that we then have the energy to go back out there onto the edge again. So absolutely, you don't get to feel guilty about that, because that just means that you are human. And it is ironically a reflection of how much you do love and how much you do care, because you have set your standards for what you do so far beyond what a human is capable of doing. That is that is that is wonderful and is to be respected and supported, but it is also unrealistic, and you can't get down on yourself for just being human
Mm.
and just and having real limitations, because you can't give care unless you are also caring for yourself, and give yourself some kindness and some grace when you fail those expectations.
Outstanding. Outstanding. See, I told you no matter what you talk about, you're going to bring great value to everyone, including me. So
You're very kind.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Um, so, um, you speak of the edge,
Mhm.
do you feel like since you took your experiences and instead of
Mhm.
just saying, okay, I feel at peace and I'm okay with it, you decided to
Mhm.
help others. Do you feel like sometimes that puts you on the edge because you're kind of soaking in some responsibility for others?
Sure, but let me define the edge, because it's really important, because this is it's one of those things that we misunderstand.
Mhm.
And so it's one of the things that I wanted to clarify with the book and help people understand better. So think about it this way. The edge is a ratio. It's a ratio between the capacity you can deliver right in this moment and the demand of the task in front of you.
Mm.
So every time we're trying to do something, there's a certain demand that we've got to meet or we're going to fail, right?
Fair enough. Yeah.
So what happens is, if the demand is really low and your capacity is really high in this moment, then you're bored. If the demand is a little higher, but still relatively low, then this is habit. This is automaticity, right? You're just going through it and you don't even have to think about it. And it gets a little bit higher. Now we're engaged. And
Okay.
these are things, now we have to think about it. We have to be present in order to do it. And as we get closer and closer, as that demand gets closer and closer to the capacity we can deliver in this moment, then we get some of the most amazing, beautiful human experiences. These are called flow experiences. And we all know it. When you get in the zone, when you get in the groove, when you're succeeding and you're learning and you're just firing on all cylinders, right? And you just know that you are all that in a bag of chips, you know?
I love it.
You know that. And so those are really cool, and those happen at the edge. But if the demand, here's the tricky thing about it. If the demand slides just a little bit over the capacity you can deliver now you're going to fail. So that distance between our greatest successes and our failures is razor thin. It's razor thin. And as you're learning, people don't understand that you know, they want to downplay failures. But failures are an indication that we are at our edges. And that's where we learn, and that's where we grow. And that's just like, for example, if you want to build bigger muscles, you're going to hit the weights, and you are going to stress your weights. You're going to like lift to failure. And then you're going to allow yourself to rest and recover and grow. Same thing happens. We grow the same way cognitively by facing bigger problems that we're sometimes going to fail at, emotionally, socially, in relationships. This is why, you know, relationships are tested, and they're either strengthened or broken when they go through these extreme events, right? So now we're failing, and then a little bit more, we're still failing, but we are overwhelmed, and a little bit more, and we become injured. Oh, wow. And a little more than that, and this is what trauma is. This is trauma. So if you take on something so big that it is well outside of your capacity to deliver on any circumstance right now, then you're setting yourself up for injury or trauma. So one of the things that I had to learn, because my illness had just knocked me down so far, I had, for the last 20 years, I had been always the expert in the room. You know, I'd been the professor, I'd been the expensive consultant that came in, and my illness had knocked me down so far, I had to learn a new humility. I had to be humble in the world. I had to regain a beginner's mindset. I went back to skydiving because I knew I was going to suck at it to begin with, because my body doesn't want to do some of those things easily. And yet, by taking myself back to the basics, that was the only way that I could step by step gently grow my capacities again. And so in 2019, I went back. Your first license in skydiving, it's called your A license. It normally happens after 25 jumps. It took me 47 because I had a difficult time learning to understand what my legs were doing and control them in free fall. But with a lot of creativity and a lot of help from my Sky family at the drop zone, we figured a way to do that. And so I logged about 140 jumps in that year. And then in 2020, I set myself a bigger goal. I said, I'm going to become a serious skydiver, a legit skydiver. And what that means is crossing 500 jumps. Because 500 jumps is kind of when the training wheels come off in skydiving. You are eligible for all of the licenses in the sports, A, B, C, and D. You are eligible for professional ratings in the sport. So in order to do that in 2020, I was going to have to log better than 1 jump a day for the entire year to do that. So that meant every day learning to take myself to the edge, trip my acute stress response, save myself, and then rest and recover and come back the next day, and keep doing that constantly for the entire year. And that's what I did. I logged 370 jumps, and crossed 500 and got my coach rating. And for me, that was a really big deal.
That's
you
amazing.
know,
That's amazing.
but I had to begin by becoming more humble, and I had to begin by learning to be kinder to myself.
That's an amazing lesson. That's an amazing lesson. There was actually a lot of lessons in that entire thing right there. You know, first one I want to touch on, in case you guys missed it, capacity. What I got out of that is your capacity is not set. It can grow, you know, but you have to allow it to. Like that muscle, you got to rest and it can go up a little bit. So I think that was one of the greatest points that you put there, because a lot of people believe that their capacity is set, and that's it. If you give me anything more than this, I will always fail and I'll quit right here. You know?
And you know what I want to emphasize with this, and this is from the research, decades of research supports this. Humans are always learning. We learn until we die. And if you are not paying attention as you are moving through life, you're still learning. You just don't realize what you're learning. So if, for example, you spend 3 hours sitting on the couch watching cheesy TV and scarfing down a bag of Cheetos, you may wake up in 3 hours and go, wow, what happened to those Cheetos? And you don't even remember exactly what happened because you were spacing off. But your body and your brain learned that that's the level of challenge that's going to be expected of it.
Oh, wow.
And so what we do is we either, if humans are not growing, we are atrophying, because our system wants to be efficient. And if it's got all this capacity, but you never use it, guess what? Your system wants to adapt that down so it can use those resources elsewhere.
Wow, that's wow. That makes a lot of sense. That really does. Your body's like, hey, if you're not going to use it for the potential that we have for you, let's allocate it elsewhere. You don't want to use it to do this. We stored over some energy and potential for you to do this, but you don't want to use it, so we'll push it over here. That makes a lot of sense. I never thought of that.
And it doesn't just happen physically. It happens cognitively and emotionally and socially, because relationships have these kind of carrying capacities between us. And if you don't invest in building the trust, the respect, and the hope that kind of forms a foundation between you and other people, it's going to atrophy. And that relationship will not be able to stand the stresses of a really negative event.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense in myself and others that I see, but that makes a lot of sense when humans are really not prepared for this world. Like,
no, they're not.
Now that you say it like that,
we're adapted for acute distress. That is a short-term, immediate, emergent problem that's really concrete, like a saber-toothed tiger rumbling in the underbrush, right? And then it's we either live or we die, and if we live, then we go back to normal, and that's it. But those aren't the challenges that we live in our day-to-day world. It's like chronic illness. It's like chronic distress. It's like chronic, good grief, we are all in the whole world under chronic distress for the last couple of years. Because, 2 years in, over 2 years in now, and we don't see an end to the way the pandemic is changing our world. we still haven't figured out a way to adapt and go back to a quote unquote normal.
Mhm.
And that's distressing. And we are not made to have distress going all the time, because your distress is that triggers what's called the parasympathetic nervous system,
Hmm.
which is the acute stress response, sometimes called the fight or flight response. There's really a lot more to it than that. It's really freeze, front, flight, fight, fawn, flock, fright, faint. There's a bunch of F's going on there. There's a lot of options. I call it the F it response. And
Aptly named.
yeah, and they are all about getting distance between you and the negative thing.
Gotcha.
That's what they're all about. But a lot of these distressing things that we live with, like for me, my multiple sclerosis. Well, I'm sandwiched in my carcass with that thing and I can't get away. So we've got to have different tools for understanding this, because if you can't relax your parasympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, you cannot engage your sympathetic nervous system. And that is sometimes called your rest and digest system or your feed and breed system. And what that's about is that down regulates all of our systems. So that slows down your heart rate and your breathing and relaxes you and allows you to recover and rest and sleep and rebuild. But if you're always jacked up like a saber-toothed squirrel from the Ice Age movies, you know,
Yeah.
then you're never going to allow yourself the ability to relax, because you cannot relax your way out of distress. Fundamentally cannot happen, because if your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous systems are both trying to engage, guess what? The fight or fight response, all those F's, that's going to take precedence. Why? Because that has the urgency of trying to save you. And that's always going to take second place in your basal primal brain to resting and relaxing. Always.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I didn't even think about it. Like, for the past 2 years, we have been in a constant state of distress. And yeah, I never thought about that. But whew, I don't even remember what it was like when the world was just relaxed.
Yeah. It has. It really has. It's like, for me, you know, I don't remember what it's like to live without pain. I don't remember what it's like to live with imagine this. I have itched every day since 1989.
Wow.
That is the one symptom that has never gone away. And you know how infuriating itching is when you can't do anything about it. Because mine is, it's not anything that I can scratch away. It's nerve damage. So I literally have had to use meditation and mindfulness tools over the years to get myself to the point where I just don't care.
Wow. Wow. That's the only word I can say for that. Like, wow.
It's all I've got, man. You know, this is the life I've got in front of me, and I've got to try to make the best out of it. And you know, yeah, itching all the time sucks. Being in pain all the time sucks. Being fatigued all the time really sucks. I mean, imagine that you stayed up for like maybe around 20 hours or so. And you know, you're kind of like this about that time. Well, for me, I can do everything right. And I do. I'm really zealous about protecting my sleep. And I get a good night's sleep, and I'm regular with it, and all the stuff that I'm supposed to do. But when I wake up in the morning, that's how I feel, like I've been up for about 20 hours.
Wow.
And then I start getting, so I start the day very tired. And by the end of the day, I'm medically fatigued. Whereas, a normal person, quote unquote, if, you're going to start,
and gradually
you'll
become tired, then by the end of the day, fatigued.
maybe, probably at the end of the day, you're just really tired.
Yeah.
Because medically fatigued is qualitatively different. And you can push through being very tired, because on the other side of tired is fatigued. But on the other side of fatigued is exhausted. And medically exhausted is dangerous.
Wow.
Medically exhausted is, because you've seen, like, they get people, they've been trapped on the ocean for a couple of weeks and they get them back. And what's the thing that they're complaining about? They're saying they're almost to die of exposure and exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what's on the other side of fatigue. So when people don't understand, they talk about their friends with chronic fatigue and they say, well, you don't look sick and all that. They don't get it, that on the other side of tired is fatigue. And you may have lived that, but that's no big deal, because you can get a good night's sleep and the next day you're going to be back to normal again.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the other side of my fatigue is exhaustion. And that becomes really dangerous. So I have to be really careful. And when I do my best, I get back to really tired.
Wow.
So I'm starting off the day at a deficit.
See, and I think about it because, I was in the Army for 10 years as an infantry soldier, and we would
Mhm.
do the 12-mile ruck marches. You throwing all your gear and everything. And the thing is, we would go to 12 miles. We had to do 12 miles in, I think, 3 hours.
Mhm.
By the time you're finished, you're like, I just want to close my eyes forever, But
Yeah.
the thing is, like you said, I get to, after we're finished, they pick us up in the truck, we go back to our rooms, we go to sleep, we wake up the next day, and it's like, I'm good again. But I can't imagine to do that ruck march, get some sleep, wake up, and still have that tiredness there. That's,
Yeah.
wow.
People need to think about your energy like a bank account with an overdraft function. And so you, for example, maybe you get $800 a night as you sleep. That gets deposited in your account. And the next day you do, say, $700 worth of stuff. And so by the end of the day, you're going to feel tired. Your account's going to be pretty low. But me, let's say I do the best I can and my account only gets $400 overnight. So I start my day $400 and I do $700 worth of stuff just like you, but now I've drawn my overdraft.
Yo, but you're on 300.
Yeah, 300. And now let's say that my bank is going to charge me $50 for the overdraft fee.
Oh man.
So now I'm down 350. So when I rest for the next night, the next day, I got $50.
You got the 400 back, but you still were overdrafted $50.
Exactly. So I got $50. You're starting the next day with 700.
Wow.
Or 800 again. So, that's the difference.
What a great analogy. Like, to really put it in perspective. That was an amazing analogy.
Thanks.
It's amazing that you still get all the things that you get done. You're still able to move the way that you do. And,
I've had to work. I've had to work hard and I've had to be really slow about it. And I have to be respectful of my limits. So one of the things that I'm really big on is when I'm working, I'm actually working. Because and when I'm playing, I'm really playing. Because if you look at the time motion studies, it turns out that the average person gets somewhere between 3 and 5 hours of productive stuff done every day.
Yeah.
And yet many of us spend 10 or 12 hours, quote unquote, working every day. Well, most of the time we're just busy, shucking and jiving around.
Busy and productive. Unproductive.
Yeah.
Two different things.
Two different things. So I can still get 3 or 4 good hours of productivity in every day, but I'm very focused with it. So it's like I start every day, I get up around 5 because my system works better in the morning.
Okay.
And so I get up around 5, I meditate, and I take stock of what's working in my body that day, and what my limits are going to be that day, what I have to work with. And then I work out. So I lift weights in a row, and then I write for a little bit in the morning or analyze some data, and I get something productive done first. And only then do I check my emails and social media and all that stuff. And so like the first break, then I will do that because that's relevant to my business. And then once I've done that, I'll take a little break and I'll do something else, and I'll come back and I'll get another hour in. But the cool thing is my drop zone, a drop zone is where you skydive, is 5 miles from my house.
Nice.
And I generally work at home. So when the weather's good, I can just, knock off and I work for myself. And granted, my boss is a jerk, but I know where all of his skeletons are buried. So he lets me take off whenever I want to. And I run out and I get a jump or two in and feel refreshed, and because that really is my happy place. That's what I do for self-care. And then I'll come back and I'll get a little bit more work done.
Huh. That makes sense. It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I just did a time management workshop, and oh my gosh, I wish you were there for it. Like you,
well, I'll tell you what, people talk about managing time, and I'll tell you, that is the wrong perspective.
you can't manage
time.
You can manage what you do with your time.
You can manage attention. That's what you have to do. And what that means is you've got to practice, because you are not adapted for your attention to stay focused on one thing. That's not the way humans are adapted, because that's not what we needed for our ancestors out on the savannah.
You're right.
And so that's one reason why meditation is such a good tool, because fundamentally, whatever else you're doing with your meditation is a way of working out your attentional faculty. Because fundamentally, you are practicing how you direct your attention. And that doesn't mean having some kind of iron will focus. It means becoming more forgiving and kinder and graceful to yourself, and recognizing, oh, this new thought swam across my attention. There it is. I acknowledge it. I'm going to let it go, and I'm going to turn my attention back to what I'm doing. Because your attention is like a puppy. It's you can only keep it going for so long on something, and it's going to wander off, and you can't yell at it. You can't be mean to it, because it's not going to take well to that. You got to be kind to it and say, wow, that's interesting. And then now let's go back to our thing. And as you practice that, being kinder, more graceful, more compassionate with how you direct your attention, then you become better at managing it. And you get a better balance of what you're doing. And you also understand, people who are constantly miserable, right?
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Some people will not believe me when I say this, but I guarantee this is the overwhelming consensus from the research. You have to work at it to stay miserable.
Yeah.
Because what happens is our internal weather, our emotions and our thoughts really are like the weather. And you've got new ideas, new feelings that will kind of drift across your consciousness like clouds in the sky. And yes, there may be something bad, but the only way to keep it there in your attention is to keep focusing and ruminating on it,
Mm.
because naturally it will move on, and your attention will be directed elsewhere.
So it
So
really
you
takes
got to work
work
at
for
it.
you to grab it and say, no, stay right here in my vision. I just want to
Yeah,
focus on you.
exactly. And so when people ruminate, when people keep staying in a miserable place, that is, and I want to be really careful with how people understand what I'm saying here. That is a choice. Now, I don't mean that that's a conscious choice.
Mm.
Okay. And I don't mean that it's something that you can then just say, okay, I choose not to, and it's going to go away.
Not a switch.
It is not like that at all. Okay. Because what we have to understand is our minds are bigger than we are.
Wow.
Your identity is a little tiny part of your mind. And there's lots and lots of things going on in your mind, a lot of it in your subconscious or unconscious or preconscious, that you don't even have direct access to. And your attention is like this little spotlight that you can shine on one little part and then another little part. And when you're not looking, that other stuff is still going on over there. So you have to understand that your mind is a lot bigger than you. It's like an iceberg.
Mm.
You see just a little tiny tip of what's happening. And so if you can't force your mind to do something that you want your mind to do, cut yourself some slack, because this is difficult. And you have, that's why I come back to, you have to be kinder to yourself.
Mm.
And it takes a lot of practice. And when you practice at your edge, what did I say before? You're going to fail, because consistency is the last thing that happens when you are engaging in growth learning. Because consistency means you've pushed your edge a little further out.
Uh-huh.
And now you're not going over that boundary anymore. So
Wow.
you just got to take a deep breath and allow yourself to be fallible, to be human, to to be humble, and to be a beginner.
Wow. I really appreciate this. I really do.
Oh, there's my Akita. Look, there's Simon.
Hey. So I'm about out of time.
Sure.
Now, is there a way you could share some information on where our audience can find you or contact you, or especially to download the book as well, or buy the book, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I've made it really easy on everybody. Go to yourlifelivedwell.co.
Doesn't get
And
easier than that.
that's right. And you can download a free 100 pages from the book and see if it's something you'd be interested in. You can see the schedule for all the upcoming webinars and seminars. We're just about to announce 16 new focus seminars that are going to be offered about 45 times over the next 3 months. And so you'll see that. You'll see my blog, my podcast, which is an educational podcast, other appearances and other stuff, my links to social media, so you can follow Your Life Lived Well if you want. And so just go to yourlifelivedwell.com.
Outstanding. I'll be tapping in because this has been great, and I'm now that I know, I can't ignore it. I can't play ignorant to it. So I have to get on there and I have to follow you. And you guys and Net Builders World, I really, really recommend you do the same. This has been an amazing episode with an amazing guest. And thank you so much for the value that you brought to not only me, but my entire audience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, RJ. And I appreciate what you're doing. So thank you, and be well, and be well to all of your community.
I love it. All right, net builders, until next time, continue to build your network, continue to grow, and continue to learn.